Hey guys, welcome back. With the 2020 elections behind us and an incoming Biden administration that isn't going to meet our needs, let's discuss what you can do to make change outside of elections. Some of the biggest left streamers and podcast hosts have gone full force the vote, an idea rooted in electoral inside baseball. While it looks good on the surface, it does not build power, but it does give these left-wing streamers a means to spark an outrage and build their own revenue streams. Contrary to this opportunism, base building power is the method preferred by communists and anarchists, and it means building a mass organization of working class people to confront their problems directly. Very simply, we have power in numbers. First of all, let's discuss power. Political power is the ability to successfully enact one's will. Base building isn't the only form of power. Here are others, ranking from the most elite to most grassroots. You have lobbying and power broking, which are elite forms of power building among the wealthy and well-connected. These deals behind closed doors are why we cannot build socialism through the state while capitalism yet exists. This is a powerful form of power that remains exceedingly organized and deeply hierarchical. Below that, advocacy is a theory of power that relies on donations and grants from the wealthy to advocate on behalf of those needing service. Well-funded nonprofits like the ACLU rely on high-power lawsuits and class actions that hold power in a litigious system. Then we have activism, which relies on mobilizing people for a cause, generally a street protest. Think about the so-called movement against the Iraq War. The anti-war base was mobilized for protest after protest with no impact on the United States' ability to wage war in Iraq. Or similarly, the Black Lives Matter marches this summer mobilized for a phenomenal number of weeks without diminishing the police's ability to murder black people. Mobilizing isn't a theory of power, it's a tactic in search of a strategy. Although not bad per se, it isn't sustainable. Lastly, we have bottom-up organizing, or base building, which is a sustainable way of building power that doesn't rely on having money or connections to the wealthy. This is where we, the working class, organize ourselves. Our power grows when our numbers increase and can force the hand of our opponent, whether that be boss or landlord. Obviously, all these methods of power building are exceedingly organized. Where they differ from our organizing is how those with power are unaccountably hierarchical in power broking or non-profit structure. Think of how the boss organizes you, with a board of directors and CEO at the top, general managers above district managers, and then you've got shift supervisors and supervisors of individual teams, and then workers at the bottom. This applies just as well to our environment as tenant organizers as it does to labor space. This comes from social practice, right? This is how people in our society are accustomed to being organized. Anything different from this, democratic or otherwise, is going to be out of the ordinary for most people. So if you're ready to get organized, let's get started. The base of organizing is one-on-one conversations. As an organizer, your job is mostly to ask questions that make your fellow tenant realize she cares about the problem at hand and can fix it through collective action. As Jane McAlevey points out in Labor Notes, telling a tenant this isn't effective, but asking the right questions to get them to say it themselves will last in their memory. From here, we recruit these tenants to action and identify leaders. These leaders then go out and recruit more people. An initial organizer identifies some leaders who are recruited to an organizing committee that organizes fellow tenants. An organized union is one where you can no longer see who the first organizer was because in this context, tenants organize and are accountable for their own building or buildings under the same landlord. So when we're building power through organizing, just know it is a long-term process based on lasting relationships on shared struggle and shared interest to build out a wide network of people with skills, knowledge, and the capacity to act. To be good organizers, we must understand the difference between strategy and tactics. Strategy is the long-term plan that the organization sets based on an analysis of our conditions and resources. Strategy involves goal setting, and tactics follow that strategic context. Tactics cannot be isolated from their strategic context. Tactics exist as short-term actions, programs, and events that move us towards the goals set by our organizational strategy. A tactic's only utility is how it fits into the organization's overall strategy. Think of this as evaluating what we have and forming a plan to turn it into what we need, not the other way around. The real issue with mobilizing as a theory of power is that it is actually not a theory of power or change. It is a tactic in search of a strategy. There's nothing wrong with protests or petitions. In fact, they can be valuable tactics in a strategy. But going to protest after protest doesn't give you a way to measure concretely how each action builds power or gets you any closer to winning. Ultimately, this is not sustainable. Don't be fooled. Mobilizing and organizing develop relationships between people, unite people around a common goal, require a plan, and require patient, consistent effort. However, building actions and events focused for people who already agree with us is not sustainable long term, so we want to move away from that. Over the past few years, there has been a mind-boggling amount of discourse over what constitutes base building, and some claim it's a new tendency on the left or an online-only critique of leftists with platforms. Horseshit. All base building is expanding the universe of people who agree with you. That's it. I would consider the NRA, for example, to be a base building organization. Base building doesn't belong to any ideological group. In fact, the right has a long-term strategy of base building. The Tea Party protests, as well as the recent anti-mask protests, are a direct result of years of expensive base building from the right. When we organize ourselves into an accountable structure without wealthy donors to report to, we call this a mass organization. A mass organization is formed at the grassroots level, not as a caucus of elected leaders. This requires a strong organizing component to its campaign work and an independence from NGOs and government structure. Logically, without grant funding from the wealthy or a tax base, funding must come from membership dues. This is a twofold benefit because it both provides independence and gives each tenant or worker the buy-in feeling and confidence this organization is their own, accountable only to its members. A mass organization must identify clearly with a politically disenfranchised base. This is super important. The Labor Notes aim for the Bullseye Model is taken from the labor organizing world, but is very useful for tenant organizing as well. We can reduce this to 4 general audiences of mass organizing, the first being the core. It's safe to assume if you're watching this, you are the core. This is leadership, well-respected members, working group members, etc. It's important to note this is not elected leadership. These are leaders who can drive others to action. The next ring is your active membership. These are folks who are engaged and show up to meetings or work on projects. These are folks whose engagement is critical to the life of the group. The next ring are supporters or paper members. These are people who have joined but not participated in the organization. Perhaps they would show up to a rally or sign a petition but are not consistently active in the organization. The last layer is the unorganized base. Tenants are natural allies of the tenants movement, and workers are the natural allies of the labor movement, but they may not identify with it consciously. Our goal as organizers is not to focus solely on the organized, but to expand the base of people on our side. There is a temptation to ignore tenants or workers who are actively opposed to our organization, but this isn't a good idea either. There is a benefit for moving those actively hostile to your organization to be indifferent to it. This concept has been represented in labor literature as rungs on a ladder, with higher ladder position being more preferable. This can be applied to any type of group though, from tenant organization to DSA chapter. Sit down and list every person in your group and decide what you want your metrics to be. Joined online, paid dues, has been to an event, etc. Then check each box, and when you're done, you have a visual representation of the engagement of your membership, from most engaged to least engaged. This will take intention, and it will take time. This does not form on its own, but importantly, this provides your organization with an objective guide to its overall health. For example, you may want to talk to Mark. He's cool and down with organizing, but Lauren has been to a few things and knows her neighbors. Based on our member map, we think she could be a leader and we could move her. Even if I don't like Lauren, I have an objective reason to talk to her. This is how we fight the self-selecting nature of our social relations. In short, organizing is base building, and the result of base building is an accountable, strategic mass organization that can force the hand of your opponent through collective action. Organizing is not yelling at AOC on Twitch or marching on Washington, or liking this video or subscribing to this channel. Cheers if you do.